Hello and welcome back to the East Lake Pet Talk podcast. And this is a great day. This is our 10th episode now.
That's right. We celebrated big 1-0.
That's right, the big 1-0. So we made it for 10 episodes, and it looks like we're going to stay the course and carry on getting together every week, same time, same place. And how should people reach us, Dr. McCauley?
Well, so many ways. So, of course, we always like to answer voicemails. If you can leave us a message at our voicemail number, it's 972-808-6038. Of course, just to follow the show, there's all kinds of ways to get that on your daily listening playlist. You can go on iTunes. You can find a link below, or there is a way to search on the iTunes store. East Lake Pet Talk Podcast is what you need to look for. And then, of course, if you want to shoot us an email, if you do have any questions, send us a message at podcast@welovepets.net.
Right. Well, that's great. Well, we have been actually starting to get a lot of really wonderful feedback from our listeners and viewers. And one of the feedbacks or inquiries that came through this week was somebody said, what kind of pets do we have? And so I thought that was a pretty cool thing to ask us, because many people already know us, but for those who don't, it probably helps a little bit to know whether we're dog people, cat people, chicken people, or what. So tell everybody about your critters,
Yeah,
Dr.
so
McCauley.
right now it's actually a low point in my pet owning life. I only have two. Usually it's at least four or more. But right now I have a dog and a cat. The dog is a 2-year-old Beagle mix, Beagle Terrier mix named Huck, who got his name in a very funny way. When I was doing my internship down in Charlotte, North Carolina, there was one Christmas Eve that I was on the emergency shift, and this guy brought this little puppy in, and he had eaten a fish hook, like a treble fish hook, huge. I mean, the hook was only about that big when he came in, and we may be able to get the picture.
That's
Roger
Hook
will be able
the dog,
Hook
right?
the dog, yes, exactly. Hook the dog was that big, but the fish hook that he ate was giant too.
Wow.
We may be able to get a picture of the X-ray that Roger can show, and you can see just how big it is compared with the overall size of the body. So
and you know, that injury happens surprisingly often, and I think sometimes because there's that fish smell on a fish hook, dogs get curious, and the lures are kind of interesting and attractive looking to dogs. So I've seen them dangling off the lips or hooked inside the mouth, and it's really a tragedy when that happens.
Definitely, yeah. He was going to be put down because his owner didn't have the money to take Hook to surgery. So I, of course, was a sucker for a little puppy and took him in. We took the Hook out, and he's been a great little companion ever since. So that's my dog, and then I do have an orange tabby cat named Samson, who spends most of his day sleeping, as most cats do. He uses the toilet. I have trained him how to use the toilet,
great.
so that's the only
we
way
could
to
do
have
a whole
cat.
show on that. That'd be fun.
It's a good lesson to learn. Yep. And so those are my two. But I've had everything from squirrels to raccoons to skunks to just about everything.
Yep. You name it. So how did you come across your kitty cat?
So I was actually a fourth-year student at A&M, and he was brought in. He was found on a bridge as a kitten, and he had a big gash in his leg. And again, it was brought in as a good Samaritan, and
here you
I
fell
for it every time.
Huh?
Yep. So took him in. I was able to stitch him up. That was actually one of the first surgeries I kind of did on my own.
So you bonded over surgery.
And he's been a great little pet. He traveled out to Charlotte with me and came back, so he's been around for a few years now.
That's great. That's great. That's
what about you?
Fun.
What kind of creatures do you have?
Big family, and my immediate family consists of 6 people between my husband and I and children. And so I always hold to the rule of thumb that you probably shouldn't have more pets than you have hands, because everybody wants to be pet at the same time. And so you say you're at a kind of a minimalist point in your life. Well, you have 2 pets, and that's
perfect.
probably great.
That's right.
But the good news is it means that with 6 in my family, I can have 12. Isn't that
12.
awesome?
Can have, yeah.
Can have
Get
12.
To have 12.
I get to have 12. So I was joking earlier that if I was going to talk about my own pets, I could be here for most of the afternoon because there are so many. But we have 4 cats and currently 3 dogs. Previously had 4 up until fairly recently. So 4 and 4 dogs and cats. But then we also have chickens. We have 4 chickens. We have 2 doves. We have a fish and a ferret. And so that's kind of our family. So a lot of critters. Our cats, first of all, are all rescues. And in fact, each of our kitty cats came from East Lake Pet Orphanage, which is pretty cool. Yeah. And the 2 siblings, we have John and Lily, and they actually were brought into the orphanage as a little sibling pair,
Right.
and were a Christmas gift to my oldest 2 children. And then there's Mr. Butters, the infamous traveling cat.
I've seen him on the show.
Absolutely. Goes everywhere with my son Gabriel. And so he's a really cool cat, and we've got some neat pictures of him. Quite an interesting cat.
Yes.
And then we've got Apple. And Apple was a rescue that was actually brought in through my husband, who's also a veterinarian. And Apple grew up wearing Barbie clothes, dresses, you name it. She's also been known to do a lot of photography work. She's one of the few cats that will wear hair and lipstick.
Wow.
And just be unabashed about it. So maybe
that is a
Roderick
rare
can
find.
show a little bit of that. So yeah, Apple's unique, and Apple is our youngest daughter, Shan's favorite cat. So she calls Apple her Apple.
If you can dress up a cat in Barbie clothes and lipstick, absolutely,
Right,
that'd be my
absolutely.
favorite cat too.
And then so moving on to the dogs, the little dog that passed fairly recently is our little Chihuahua, Chloe. And Chloe I attribute to helping our youngest become in love with pets. And so we actually adopted her a couple of years ago. That's our youngest daughter. And Chloe, a little Chihuahua, was the one that really got her over her animal fear. I thought as we came back to the United States from China that we would find that she would fit into our home well, and the biggest challenges would relate to a lot of other things, but I did not think about the pets. She was so unfamiliar with dogs and cats that she was just clinging to me, scared to death, as the cats were slinking around and the dogs didn't know what to do. But it was ultimately Chloe that wound up becoming her best friend.
Isn't that interesting how animals can teach even these young kids who are in this completely separate world, going from China to the United States, just how to socially interact with, more with her siblings and people in general and animals overall.
Yes, and that was really true with Chloe. And I'll see if Roderick can show the picture of the two of them cruising around in her little toy car. So pretty darn adorable. So we miss Chloe dearly. Chihuahuas are kind of interesting as a breed. They are originally from Mexico, and so truly a Mexican breed. And the Aztecs apparently formerly raised them and sold them for food. I read that recently. Can't imagine that. But anyway, they are lovely little dogs, very loyal, very gentle dogs. Tend to be kind of clannish to where they like certain people and maybe don't like others. And we've definitely, I know, said that over the years. That sometimes Chihuahuas
they like their person, they don't like anybody else.
That's right. And I always said I'd never have a Chihuahua. Now I'm a devoted Chihuahua
I like
fan.
Chihuahuas. I got a sweet spot for them. My first dog that I ever owned was a Chihuahua.
Yeah, love those Chihuahuas now. So I'm a total convert. And then also we have a Boston Terrier, and that's Becky. And Becky is fondly known of as Bad Becky. And she's deaf and disobedient, strong-willed. Normally the Bostons, and we've had Bostons before, they're very loyal, very sweet, very gentle. Well, Becky threw out all the stereotypes about Boston Terriers, and she's great with our family, but she tries to attack joggers and cyclists. She looks for an opportunity to bolt out the front door and go chase people.
She takes over the Chihuahua's responsibility.
Oh my gosh,
Chihuahua's not mean,
yeah,
so she had to step up and take over that.
She's a little ankle biter, be the truth known. And of course, never think that once you've had a dog that you can adopt another one and have what you had with the other one, because they're all different.
Separate, separate.
Totally separate.
Unique, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And the other two that you had?
Well, the other two we have are a couple of cattle dogs, and they, along with Becky, because Becky taught them how to do this, climb up a little staircase at the back of our house, a little iron staircase. They jump from there to the roof, and they run around our roof. So you can determine...
Not squirrels on the roof, but cattle dogs on the roof.
Cattle dogs and Boston Terriers. So anyway, that's kind of the family.
You got a beefy roof, or at least know a good roofer guy.
Yeah. Fortunately, no problems yet.
Hope they don't jump off the roof and get lost, because that'd be a big
we've not
risk.
had that problem. I think they're pretty careful, thank goodness.
Well, if they ever did, there are, a lot of ways to keep track of your dogs. Of course, they should always wear a collar, but we recommend that all pets, dogs, cats, anything that could ever get outside and run away, be microchipped as well.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we're going to talk a little bit about microchipping, and this is our friendly little cat. And before we switch over and talk about microchipping, Roderick, I want to see if you can post a picture of Patty Duke. Patty Duke is one of our chickens, and she actually made our Christmas card this year. So, but there are 3 others I won't show you at this time. But yeah, see what I mean? Get me started.
Chickens.
I can't stop
Gotta go on the
talking about
chickens.
them all. And then we'll tell you about the ferrets and all that, but they're a
Right.
lot of fun.
bet.
But microchipping, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that is why we've got this little kitty cat here, our little calico cat. And this has been a great week because we've gotten 2 pets home
right.
through microchip technology.
It works.
It does work, and there's a couple ways it works. You can have the little tag here on the collar that shows up that has the one-of-a-kind ID number that is associated with the chip here, like this. And I don't know if you can zoom in close to see what the chip looks like here, Roderick, but it is just a little tiny thing. I don't know if you can see that, but I'll try to hold it up there. But that's it.
Yeah,
that's all there is to it.
Little metal grain of rice
That's
is how I
right.
describe
That's
it.
all there is to it. So when that is inserted under the skin, you just scan with a little scanner like this right over the spot, and then poof, there's your one-of-a-kind ID number. So easy as can be, and it really does work.
And lasts forever. It's not something they can slip out of, like with a collar or,
Right. Right.
get
So
pulled
even
off.
if, this collar gets separated, you've got the microchip there. So it's a double insurance policy. And it's hard to believe, but 1 in 3 pets will get lost at some point during their lifetime. And without proper identification, 90% of those don't get home. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, very big deal. You can imagine all the heartache that you can avoid and all the stress just by having, the identification. Of course, the collar and the tag, that's the quickest way, but the most secure way is having a microchip, because it can't be taken off by someone who may steal a pet. It can't be torn off if they pull out of a collar or off a leash. And so it's good to have several different types of identification on your
Definitely
pet.
agree with that. Well, and then we had another neat little feedback this week related to a listener calling in and reaching out to us to ask about lepto. And I know we've talked a lot about lepto,
Yes, we
but these folks were wondering if they should economize and skip the lepto vaccine for their dogs coming up here. And here this week we've had a couple of cases of lepto, and so just in thinking about leptospirosis, it is so common, and in fact there's a recent report that there's been an upswing in positive leptospirosis cases in Colorado and in Texas, and so this is a very preventable condition with vaccine. It's definitely not a place that I'd want to cut corners, and leptospirosis has risen to be the #1 cause of acute kidney failure in dogs. So,
Still underdiagnosed as well. They
Yes.
say that, just a percentage of the actual cases actually get diagnosed and worked out properly, which of course we do have treatments for, but we'd much rather avoid having to
Right.
treat with the vaccines, as
right,
always.
and with early detection and early treatment, you can successfully treat many of these cases, but some patients still die even once you get underway with treatment. And then, of course, it's communicable to people as well, and so it can spread by any body fluids or urine, either one, and it's just, I think, something to remember, that it's protecting your family plus your pet when you get these vaccines done.
That's right. It is tempting sometimes to try to cut corners, see, well, can we just hold off on that vaccine right now? Always cheaper to prevent the disease than it is to
Right.
treat it. And,
Right.
living in a
Because-
place where it's endemic, like
Right.
Texas, along with heartworm disease and parvo, it's just stuff
Right.
that once we start having to treat for it, the dog's worse off, you're worse off, and your pocketbook's worse
Right.
off. And so,
and you don't want your family to deal with this.
No.
And in fact, statistics show that between 6 million and 10 million people every year get leptospirosis. So who wants that?
absolutely not me.
Yeah, not me either.
Talk about wanting to cut corners or do try to save a little money. This will be a teaser for next week's show. I am going to talk a little bit about the increase we've seen, at least on the veterinary side, in the rise in generic drugs. So a lot of times, people will say, "Well, don't give me the name brand. I'll take the generic," which works in some cases. But I know, at least on the veterinary side, we've seen a huge increase in some drugs, some generic drugs, and so we'll talk about that in next week's show.
I don't know about you, but I think there are some drugs where maybe you're okay to use a generic, and some where you're really not. I get nervous about some of some of those medicines.
Oh yeah, and you
on
have
the
to make
generic
sure they're
side.
sourced properly and everything. But that stuff we can get into
Okay.
in next week's show.
All right. And another little bit of news.
That's right.
The 2013 Rabies report has just come out, and that's closing out all of 2013, and hopefully pretty soon we'll hear about 2014. But it's interesting and good news to hear that we've slightly decreased on rabies incidence in the country. So a little bit over a 4% decrease, which is great news.
That's good. Good.
And most of the cases, in fact, 92% of the positive cases came from wildlife. And so number one on the list in terms of rabies transmitters, raccoons, followed by bats, skunks, then foxes, then cats, then cattle, and lowest on the list, thank goodness, were dogs. But in any case, you have to be wary about wildlife as well as domestic pets. And I always say that vaccine is a great insurance policy, because if you are protected and rabies vaccinated, it makes a difference in the quarantine period. It determines whether your pet has to be taken out to an outside quarantine facility or whether your pet can stay home.
And it's the law. So
and it's the law.
Stick by the law. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, something not quite as uplifting, but still in animal news. Keeps you, make sure you stay careful when you go out to some of these exotic wildlife ranches. Two people, actually kind of north of here, two people were trampled to death by a camel at a Texas farm. So a large, aggressive camel actually trampled to death the owner of the farm and a volunteer out there. I know in Texas, maybe in other areas, they have some place where you can go and see exotic wildlife, camels and zebras and stuff that doesn't live in Texas. And it's nice to go out and see that. But remember that those are wild animals, and no matter how docile they may seem, do not get out of your car to get near them. Don't go in the pen with them. Stay, ways back, because observing is okay, but don't try to interact with them in a physical sense, because two people were killed actually while in this cage with this large camel.
Wow. Well, I always say with some of these animals, you can take them out of the wild, but you can't take the wild out of the animals.
Definitely
not. Caution is very much indeed an important thing. Yeah,
yep.
Don't take that risk. And that's one of the reasons I don't personally see large cats. I prefer to stick to the small ones.
Yep.
And speaking of the small ones, at East Lake Pet Orphanage right now, all the way through Valentine's Day, we're doing an adoption special for an adult cat adoption. And we see that unfortunately with adult cats, so many of them wind up staying in shelters for a very long time, sometimes months or even years before they're adopted. And in fact, that leads us to talk about Chunky Monkey, who's our kitty cat of the week. Yeah, precious little kitty. And she has actually been with us cresting toward 2 years now. And it's so hard to believe when you look at these pictures of her. She's just beautiful and such a sweet cat, but she's a mature kitty that really needs a great place to go. And she was actually owned by a couple of Teamsters that passed away. And so if anybody has an affection for that profession.
Teamster, yeah. Well, we talked about, when we had that influx of puppies, a lot of times the puppies will be adopted out, almost immediately, but sometimes the mother will stay there for a long time. And, we recommend, if you are going to get a pet, for sure adopt a rescued pet. And if so, think about adopting an adult pet. For one, they're probably potty trained already.
That's right.
We're to make sure if they come from East Lake, they have all their shots. They've been dewormed. They've been spayed or neutered. So get on online and check out Chunky Monkey.
Right. And I'd like to say hello to somebody out there that's one of our regular watchers. It turns out I had the occasion to meet on the telephone this week the mom of Huck that we previously know as Finnick. And we love Finnick, now Huck. And it was so much fun for me to get to kind of meet his mom and talk to her. She's a huge fan. She's been such a lovely individual to complement the orphanage and the work that we do there. And one of the things she said she liked so much about the orphanage is the work we do to try to make sure these pets are super healthy before they're adopted. And I don't know about you, but sometimes you meet somebody in a conversation or in person and you just feel an instant connection with them. Well, that's the way I felt about Huck's mom. And so we're going to share a picture of Huck here and celebrate his wonderful new life. And thank you to all of you that remember to adopt rescue. It really does make a difference. And even though you can't adopt them all, you can make a huge difference in the life of at least one. Yep,
absolutely. Well, we always recommend that. We recommend you get in touch with us in one of the myriad of ways. Of course, we always recommend you subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can give us a call at 972-808-6038 and leave us a voicemail question or comment. Of course, search for us on iTunes and send us an email if you do have any questions that you want us to get to on the show at podcast@welovepets.net.
Great. And it's about time for us to wrap up. So we'll come back with more next week. We're going to be talking about generic drugs and lots of other fun things, maybe even some pet training tips. So we'll be back with more on Pet Talk Podcast.
Thanks.